When I was in high school, I spent 3 months going to school on a farm in Vermont, and it was a place called the Mountain School. And in the grand scheme of my education, it was a relatively short amount of time, but it had a huge impact on me because I was young and impressionable. And during the day, we would study the relationship between humans and nature. That was the academic focus. But in the afternoons, we would take care of the farm. We would chop wood. We would take care of the animals. We would make meals for each other and grow food. And I really got to see how our food is grown and the positive impact that it can have, not just on our health, but also on the health of a community.
My parents, when I was a kid, got the gig of being caretakers on a farm in central Massachusetts. So I was, born in New York City, and then all of a sudden from, I think, 2 to 7, thereabouts, I lived on this sort of funky old, decrepit farmhouse. And I know it impacted me. I know it did. I can feel it in my bones. I can feel it when I am, walking in the woods and I'm getting some extra energy, and I don't know where I'm getting it from them. And I think it's because when you're a kid and you were exposed to just the basics, planting and picking, and you get to eat some of that food, you will see a benefit. I think, that's true for everyone.
Mama Tree started because we had this amazing windfall from Bob's Burgers, my husband's show. And we were thinking about what to do with it and how to have a positive impact. And so when it came to the point where Loren and I were thinking about what can we do with this gift from Bob's Burgers? What can we do with this windfall, to use a farming analogy? We thought, well, that's something that we care about. Let's try to help people see that the individual choices that they make can have, in aggregate, a positive difference. And let's help people see that if we demonstrate how farming and how food can be grown in a positive way without a lot of chemicals, it can have a tremendous impact on climate health, but also on their own health and the health of their kids, and so on and so on. And it can result in cleaning up the waterways and decreasing carbon and enriching the soil instead of depleting the soil, which is how conventional agriculture works.
When you talk to farmers who are trying to do this right, on some level, what they mean when they say regenerative farming is they're really talking about self-interest. It's not homework. It's not like, oh, you should do this, clean behind your ears. It's, you should do this for yourself. You should do this for your farm. You should do this for your community. All of their practices are basically, these beneficial feedback loops that put more water back into the system, put more cooler temperatures back. You end up with this kind of, positive flywheel of good results. And so the folks that are really, having to do the books have some tough decisions to make. Their resistance is economic. They're either like, I don't know how to be an organic farm because I don't know how to make the dollars and cents work. If you start dialing in some of these systems, not only are they good for everyone else, good for the environment, all those things that are meaningful and important, but also sound like, preachy. The final piece, I think, is you beat down the resistance with practicality. You say, no, this actually will make sense once you have all these systems working for you. You'll reap the rewards by any measure, including economic.
When we have farm tours, I have everyone circle up and we hear where everyone's coming from and what brought them here. And one question I like to ask is if anybody thinks that being a human inherently means you're a stain on the earth. And inevitably, almost everyone raises their hand every single time. And what's so beautiful is then at the end of the farm tour, we circle everybody back up again. They say that it changed their whole perspective. We all have a similar goal and vision in mind, which is a place that's working together, local economies, resilient ecology, how to farm with nature. So what does it look like to use fire in a more thoughtful and intentional way, because this ecology was co-evolved with fire.
It's often the case that really small changes in management make really big ecological impact. And so in what Forest Services used to do, if they also get big piles and they just burn it from underneath, just like you do a burn pile. And that would create such a hot fire, it would completely scorch the earth below it. And so it would just create this dead zone of soil. And so now, even if the Forest Service doesn't produce biochar, but they just light the piles on top, then it doesn't create that heat on the soil, but it creates a thick layer of charcoal at the bottom that's then protects the soil, and then you just spread out the charcoal. So you've added pure carbon that's microbial habitat and this water storage capacity. You just added that to the soil and spread it out versus just scorching it and killing it. The only reason why conventional farming is possible is because of cheap oil and because these things are subsidized. And I think also the focus on carbon alone is something that we do, but it's just one of many ecological metrics. And from our perspective, it's much more useful on a human scale to look at what are the overall benefits and services that the ecosystem provides, and carbon sequestration is just one of many. When we take a step back and look at well, what does ecosystem health and functionality look like, and how can we support that, and how can we amplify these processes that continue the succession of ecology. So we think a lot in those terms, how we can tie into that, and big part of that is our agroforestry design, how we would design and manage a forestry system. And like Natalie said, most of our natural ecosystems here are groundwater dependent ecosystems. And in our climate specifically, most of 40 to 70% of precipitation is actually based on the evapotranspiration off of vegetation.
So that's the evapotranspiration is when trees exhale, basically. They
exhale clean air and moisture.
And moisture through the stomata of their leaves.
And if we look at the Central Valley in California, or the Ventura Coast, all of that used to be wetland. So the entire Central Valley, you could take a boat and paddle from Bakersfield to Sacramento and be under the shade of trees. The entire Central Valley was a wetland. Entire Ventura and Camarillo was a wetland. And we completely drained that and leveled it, and that took away essential vegetation that was essential for climate buffers and for buffering extremes. And so the policymakers and all the public discourse is so focused on carbon and how it's a greenhouse gas, it's a warming gas. But we could also be focused on how can we improve living systems that have cooling effects or buffering effects. And so wetlands, healthy riparian zones, healthy forest systems, agroforestry systems, these things contribute to buffering these extremes.
I love to work with the trees, both in carpentry and when they're living. I take care of them. So I help lead a lot of the pruning workshops that are done here, or whatever pruning is needed.
I remember I used to see trees get pruned and be like, oh no, that's so sad, like it hurts them. And what Abudu has so graciously brought me into the practice of is actually pruning trees helps them. It supports their health, and it helps them to direct their energy in a way that is supportive for them, and that allows for the matching of the system of their roots and the system of their branches, and really taught me about the beauty of what it means to be a human tending to these trees. We can actually see them sustain a much longer lifespan. And we've seen that even with the pixie trees, with how they were being pruned before we came in, was just really hacked with just some saws real quick, and you see the trees have constant stress responses. But it's really beautiful to witness how we've slowly started transforming that with the pixies, and then even pruning the olive trees, how much more healthy they are, how much more vital they are. And you see this with ancient olive trees throughout different lands, throughout Italy, throughout Greece, throughout Palestine. You see healthy olive trees that are hundreds of years old and generations years old, because they have evolved with human hands.
And it can result in cleaning up the waterways and decreasing carbon and enriching the soil instead of depleting the soil, which is how conventional agriculture works.